The late summer wind carried the dry scent of sagebrush as Eli McCrae trudged along the edge of his worn-out pasture. The sun sat low behind a bank of copper clouds, signaling another blistering day on terrain that gave nothing freely. Eli wiped the sweat from his brow and adjusted the brim of his hat. His boots were cracked, his coat faded, and he was beginning to look as weathered as the land he tended. The ranch had once been prosperous. His father's brand, McCrae Cattle Company, had been respected from the Pecos to the Rio Grande. But storms had rolled in the previous spring, floods tearing through the valley and killing off half the herd. Then a mountain lion took his best stallion. His other horses grew lame, sick, or simply too old to manage the daily grind. Now he had only Molly, his last horse, a gentle bay mare with a white blaze and a gait smooth as river stones. He depended on her, for hauling feed, for checking the perimeter, for keeping the ranch alive. Losing her would be like losing another piece of himself. Eli followed the broken fence line, studying the scattered posts the storm had left behind. He had barely taken 3 steps past the fallen cottonwood when he froze. Something, no, someone, was tucked into the shadow beneath the tree's twisting branches. Eli's hand instinctively went to his empty holster. He rarely carried a gun, but out here caution kept a man alive. 2 figures huddled together, barely visible, small, thin, trembling. Children, girls. Their dark hair was tangled with dust and leaves, their clothes torn. One stared at him with fierce defiance, the other with a pain so deep it made Eli's chest ache. He approached slowly, palms raised. "Easy," he murmured, "not here to frighten you." The older girl, maybe 12 or 13, shielded the younger one with her body. Her chin lifted in warning, though her hands trembled. "We don't want trouble," she said in halting English. Neither did Eli. "What happened to you two?" he asked gently. The younger girl sniffled, clutching her ankle, which was swollen to nearly twice its size. The skin had turned a worrisome shade of purple. The older one explained, her voice cracking with exhaustion, that a flash flood had torn through the ravine where their band had been gathering mesquite. They'd been separated, swept along by the rushing water before managing to crawl onto higher ground. Night came fast. Coyotes paced the open plains, their howls echoing across the valleys. The girls walked until their bodies gave out. Finally, they'd collapsed beneath the cottonwood. They didn't know how far they were from their people. Eli glanced at the empty horizon. The nearest settlement, white or native, was miles away. Too far for 2 exhausted girls, one injured, to reach on foot. And the stretch between here and anywhere was no place for children after dark. "You're safe now," Eli said. "Let me help." He kneeled beside them, careful not to make sudden movements. He pulled a small canteen from his belt and offered it. The elder girl hesitated, mistrust flickering across her face, but the younger one reached for it with trembling hands. She drank greedily until Eli gently took it back so she wouldn't make herself sick. Next he examined the injured ankle. "Sprained," he murmured, more to himself than to them. "But you'll mend." He tore a strip from his own shirt and wrapped it with slow, deliberate care. The older girl watched his hands, suspicion gradually shifting into guarded hope. When he finished, he rose and looked toward his ranch house, distant and small against the golden plain. He thought of Molly standing in the corral, the last piece of stability he possessed. It would take days for him to repair fences and tend the land again. Without a horse, everything would take twice as long, maybe more. He wasn't sure he could manage it, but he was even less sure he could send 2 injured, terrified children into the night on their own legs. He returned with Molly. The mare nickered softly, lowering her head to sniff the girls. The younger one reached out with wonder, brushing her fingers along the mare's muzzle. Eli steadied the reins, swallowing the lump in his throat. "She's yours," he said. The older girl's eyes widened. "No, this is your only horse." "Doesn't matter," Eli replied. "You need her more." Eli didn't so much sleep as drift in and out of restless awareness. Every creak of the old ranch house, every gust rattling the loose shutters, snapped his eyes open again. He had given away Molly, his last horse, his last dependable partner, and though he felt no regret, the weight of that choice pressed heavily on his thoughts. By the time dawn crept across the plains, bruised purple giving way to streaks of gold, Eli was already up and pouring a thin cup of coffee. The pot was nearly empty. Supplies were low. Everything he owned was depleted, worn, or on the edge of failure. He stepped outside into the cold morning air, arms crossed against the chill. The world smelled of dust and sage. The quiet seemed deeper than usual, as if holding its breath. And then he saw them. Dark shapes against the ridge. Riders. Many. Eli stiffened, his mug slipping slightly in his hand. A small cascade of coffee splashed onto the porch. He didn't move, didn't breathe. The figures grew clearer as they descended from the ridge, a line of mounted warriors, easily a dozen or more, moving with deliberate formation. Sunlight glinted on spearpoints, on the polished handles of rifles slung across shoulders. Their horses were well fed, swift-looking, silent except for the soft drumming of hooves. Eli's heart hammered. Apache warriors. He knew misunderstanding could kill quicker than bullets. A rancher with no horse, found near their missing children, such a picture could be twisted in 100 wrong ways. He had no defense, no witnesses, nothing but the truth, and out here the truth didn't always save a man. Still, he forced himself to walk forward, away from the porch. Hands open, empty, visible. The riders slowed as they neared the main clearing. At their head rode a tall, broad-shouldered man with hair braided and wrapped in red cloth strips. A hawk feather fluttered near his temple. His face was lined, stern, carved by sun and hardship. His gaze fixed on Eli with an intensity that cut deeper than any blade. Eli swallowed hard. "Morning," he said quietly. There was no reply, only silence, a dangerous, measuring silence. The warriors spread out slightly, encircling him, not hostile, but cautious. Every eye was on him, every hand close to a weapon. The chief dismounted with practiced grace. The man towered over Eli even without the horse, his presence commanding, controlled. He stepped closer until there were only a few feet between them. "You are Eli McCrae," the chief said. His English was rough but clear. Eli nodded. "I am. My daughters passed through this land." So that was it, the moment of truth, or death. "They did," Eli replied, steadying his voice. "I found them last night under a fallen tree. One was hurt. They were lost. I gave them water, bandaged the ankle, and sent them home." He paused, then added, "Gave them my horse to get there." A ripple moved through the warriors, surprise, murmurs, glances exchanged. But the chief, his expression didn't change. "You gave them your only horse?" the chief asked, eyes narrowing. "Yes," Eli said simply. "They were 2 children alone at night. You'd have done the same." Another silence followed, longer, heavier. The kind that made the air itself feel tight. Eli's stomach knotted. If they thought he had forced the girls or lied, his ranch would be ash before sunset and his bones left to bleach in the grass. The chief looked at him for several long heartbeats. Studied him, searched him, then something softened. Barely, but enough to shift the entire atmosphere. He placed a hand over his own chest and bowed his head once. A gesture of deep respect. "My daughters live because of you," he said. "They reached our camp during the night. They spoke of a man who helped them, a man who gave more than he could afford to give." The warriors behind him eased. Their posture lowered, rifles dipped, horses relaxed beneath them. Eli could hardly believe his eyes. The roan stallion stepped forward, its hooves crunching softly on the dry prairie grass, mane glinting in the morning light. The horse's eyes were bright, intelligent, and steady, like it knew it was not only a gift but a responsibility. The chief guided the reins toward Eli with a deliberate calm, as though offering more than an animal, offering respect, honor, and a connection that transcended words. "This is for you," the chief said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of the plains and centuries of tradition. "For the kindness you showed my daughters. For giving when it was hard to give." Eli shook his head, stepping closer to the stallion. His hands reached out cautiously, touching the horse's warm, sleek neck. He felt the pulse of life beneath the skin, steady and strong. I didn't expect anything in return," he admitted, voice low. "I only did what I thought I had to. That is why you are worthy of it," the chief said simply, the words carrying an unshakable certainty. He looked Eli in the eye, and Eli felt as if the chief could see into the very depths of his soul, weighing it, measuring it, acknowledging it. The warriors behind the chief stood quietly, some shifting their weight on horseback, but all of them silent. There was no boast, no show of strength, only the gravity of a gift given and accepted. Eli understood then what it meant to be recognized by those whose lives were governed by honor, loyalty, and courage. The chief spoke again, slower this time, as if the words were meant to leave an imprint. "Your land is hard, your life is hard, you helped when there was risk and loss. That is rare, Eli McCrae." Eli swallowed, feeling a lump rise in his throat. Years of solitude, of hardship, of storms and droughts and loss, seemed to converge into this single moment. A man's life out here could be unforgiving, and yet, somehow, today the universe had balanced itself. The chief gestured toward the ridge. If trouble finds you here, send smoke toward the north ridge. My people will see it. Help will come. Eli's eyes widened. The weight of that promise was heavier than any gold or land could be. The plains were vast and often brutal. The idea that he was not completely alone, that there were eyes and hearts watching over him, stirred a feeling he had long thought dead inside him, hope. The chief gave a slight nod and stepped back. The warriors formed a line behind him, and with a single, coordinated motion, they turned their horses and began to ride away. The thunder of hooves filled the quiet morning, echoing across the flatlands and canyons, carrying with it a sense of inevitability, of destiny. Eli watched until the last warrior disappeared over the ridge. He was alone again, but not in the same way. He was still a man with his ranch in disrepair, still a man whose cattle and fences demanded constant labor, but now he had something more. Something beyond the tangible, a connection to life, to people, to a code that valued courage and compassion above all else. The roan shifted beneath him, nudging Eli's shoulder with a warmth that felt like an affirmation. He smiled, a rare, full smile that hadn't touched his face in months. The horse wasn't just a gift, it was a symbol, a reminder that even in the harshest lands, even when the world seemed to strip everything away, acts of kindness could return in ways unimaginable. Eli led the roan toward the corral, marveling at its strength and grace. With Molly gone, he had worried about the endless work ahead. Now, with this new horse, he felt something else entirely, a chance. A renewal. Perhaps he could rebuild, perhaps even better than before. The plains could be cruel, but they were also generous to those who respected them and to those who acted with integrity. As he adjusted the roan's saddle, he thought of the girls. Safe now, reunited with their father and their people. Brave, resilient, and unharmed because someone, him, had chosen compassion over survival, humanity over practicality. That knowledge warmed him more than any sun ever could. For a long time, Eli simply stood in the corral, letting the morning sun wash over him, feeling the heartbeat of the horse beneath his hands. The land stretched endlessly in all directions, golden and wild, and for the first time in months, he felt ready to face it. The gift, the promise, the respect, it was more than he had ever imagined he could receive in his lifetime. The plains were still harsh, unforgiving, and unyielding. But sometimes, as today had proven, they rewarded the brave and the kind in ways that no man could anticipate.